Fuzzz99, or Maul as most people know him, first made a name for himself as a loud and hyperactive trans creator who captured attention by sharing his daily life in a way that was both unfiltered and entertaining.
Yes, who had another gender adventure? I did! I actually owe this one a spooky haircut, but I'm gonna explain, hold on. Ever since I cut all my hair off back in 2020, I have loved it and felt so happy and so much like me. But whenever my hair gets to be a certain length, I tend to get very
And while they brand themselves as a family-friendly creators, lately, that image has been overshadowed by controversy. From getting fired due to interactions with underage LGBT students.
So I've been getting recognized a lot more in public recently, and because of a certain type of people, I've decided that I'm going to start giving out little presents to anyone that recognizes me.
To wishing straight people didn't exist.
I literally said, like, who would want to be straight? Blech.
Fuzzz is slowly being denied by the very same community that he claims to protect.
Gross. This is not hating. This is critiquing in a really gorgeous fashion. Every single time I go on TikTok, bro, I don't know what the fuck is my For You page. Gay talk, apparently. Listen, I love being gay, but you know what I hate? Being gay.
After facing criticism from his own community, people couldn't help but wonder, is Fuzzz99 a misunderstood creator? Or just another TikToker undone by their own contradictions? Let's dive in. Much like Jellybean, another creator dragged online for being loud, annoying, and cringe, Fuzzz99's downfall didn't start with his creepy outbursts.
Hi.
Your pronouns don't equal your gender!
It built slowly, as the very things that made him popular became the reasons he was torn apart. What began as light-hearted jokes about Maul, constantly yelling into the mic and explaining LGBT terms while repeating his most famous catchphrase,
Well,
eventually led to targeted bullying. He was mocked across different social media platforms, which resulted in a stitching trend where creators often edited clips to show how annoying or cringe his content is. Critics argue that his exaggerated style and family-friendly branding contradict the more explicit themes in his videos.
Happy Pansexual and Panromantic Visibility Day! Yeah!
every year on May 24th, we celebrate our pansexual and panromantic friends. Yeah!
While Jellybean faced criticism too, people held back because she was only 16 at the time. In contrast, people showed no restraint when it came to Fuzzz99, while pointing out that at nearly 30 years old, he should know better. And with Fuzzz99, it's not just about being cringe, it was about crossing lines.
You can identify as any gender you want and use whatever pronouns make you feel most comfortable. Meaning you can identify as a male, but use she, her pronouns if that's what you like. I identify as just me. Whatever that is. I'm just me, baby.
In fact, one of those so-called lines cost him his real-life job, after a video he made about gender identity sparked backlash outside of TikTok.
I was recently hate crimed for being queer, and as a result of me being hate crimed for being queer, it ultimately led to me being fired from my job as a high school substitute teacher. I hate making content like this. I love making people laugh and smile and forget about all their troubles.
One of the most controversial posts Fuzzz99 ever made was the video where they explained different gender identities. On paper, the content itself wasn't wrong. In fact, if you stripped away the performance and just read the transcript, a lot of the definitions were accurate and genuinely informative. People in the LGBTQ+ community who were still learning about themselves could probably find those breakdowns useful.
Long ago, in 600 BCE, on the island of Lesbos, lived a Greek queer poet named Sappho. Sappho wrote many works exploring love, desire, and what it means and feels to be with a woman.
But here's the catch. Fuzzz99 had this over-the-top animated style that made everything feel like a skit. Personally, I think that style works fine for certain types of comedy content. No, but when you're talking about something as sensitive and deeply personal as gender identity, that tone can feel dismissive or even mocking.
If you're part of the community and you support who I am, drop a rainbow in the comments right now!
That's where the real criticism came in. People were quick to point out that by overacting and turning gender education into spectacle, Fuzzz99 risked making the entire LGBTQ+ community look like a joke. One Redditor even said, "As a lesbian, we do not claim them. They have a decent message, but they're annoying as hell." And to be honest, I do see that perspective. Representation matters, and when one creator becomes the face of something, their style can color how outsiders perceive the whole group.
What are some common lies about bisexuality? Well, I'm glad you asked. Bisexual people, like men and women, the exact same amount.
On the other hand, though, one person's delivery style should not dictate the credibility of an entire community. Just because you don't like how Fuzzz99 explains something, doesn't mean the information itself isn't valuable. In some ways, the fact that they were so loud and unapologetic might have actually made younger audiences feel more comfortable engaging with the topic.
Guess who's going on a gender adventure right now? We are! You're coming with me, man! Boom! I came out to my parents last night, and it went really, really well, and I finally feel ready to share my name with the world. That's me. I'm Mac. Nice to meet you guys.
However, the actual question is, are his views helpful or harmful for the society? I think the answer is both. It depended heavily on who was watching. Another ongoing issue is the contradiction between Fuzzz99, presenting their content as family-friendly, while sometimes slipping in humor with more mature undertones. Now I want to pause here, because this is important. When you claim your content is family-friendly, people expect you to maintain a certain standard, and a joke about sex positions doesn't exactly fit that mold, and apparently I'm not the only one who thinks that way. Because one Redditor would also talk about this while saying, "I don't think posting your preference regarding bottoms is family-friendly in any way." That said, there are more cringy or problematic people who deserve to leave TikTok permanently. Fuzzz99's childish and animated style of shooting his videos also sparked allegations that he was trying to attract children and even messaging minors in their DMs. After Fuzzz99 turned off his comments and disappeared for a while, fans were quick to flood his DM with love, while others, like on Reddit, were quick to say, "I guess they couldn't take being outed as a while." However, Molly didn't take too long to clarify that he had totally different reasons for turning off his comments.
But I turned comments off because there's a bigger plan already in motion, baby, that only I know about. So stay tuned, baby.
Choosing to assume that some of the parents at the former school where he was working saw some of his videos about being friendly with their kids and probably pushed for him to get fired in the first place.
What happened to me wasn't fair to me or to my students that I helped make a better and safer environment for every single day. Right now in America, queer teachers are under attack and are constantly being targeted and kicked out of the classrooms for being who they are and for helping students feel welcomed for who they are.
On the other hand, adult jokes sneaking into content that appeals to kids isn't new at all. Personally, I think about show with sounds like SpongeBob or Shrek, which are loaded with innuendo that goes straight over children's heads. That doesn't automatically make them unsafe for kids. It just means the humor works on two levels. So, is Fuzzz99 guilty of anything beyond following a pretty standard entertainment trope? Maybe not. That said, I do think the problem is my perception. Or Fuzzz99 didn't have the established credibility of Nickelodeon or DreamWorks. When a random TikToker makes those jokes, people are much quicker to assume bad intent.
I work at Camp Brave Trails. Of course I'm decked out in rainbow all the time.
What the f is that? What is that? Seems to me that's a camp for the mentally ill. Looks like the whole alphabet is there. I don't know, I wouldn't trust any kid to go there. What is that? I don't like what I'm seeing there.
Personally, I think this is where criticism turned into cruelty. You can dislike someone's content, you can even call them cringy or hypocritical. That's fair game. But spreading baseless allegations is something entirely different. It crosses the line from critique into defamation.
What makes me feel unsafe is that this 26-year-old is very desperately trying to cater to young children.
Accusations didn't exactly come out of thin air. Fuzzz99 was openly queer, and that made them an easy target for certain online communities that already view LGBTQ+ people with suspicion. People were quick to project stereotypes, painting them as predatory simply because they were loud, non-conforming, and talking about gender. And then again, once that narrative takes hold online, it spreads like wildfire.
If your kid were to come out to you as trans or gay, you can't respect and love them for who they truly are, then you shouldn't have kids. Just because your parents birthed you doesn't mean they get to decide who you are.
To make matters worse, some of the harassment escalated into doxing attempts and serious threats. Whether or not you like Fuzzz99, nobody deserves that level of targeted abuse.
It was once 3 years ago for a month because people online decided to make my real life dangerous and I had to step away for my own safety. And I don't know if anyone actually noticed, besides a couple of my mutuals, but I stepped away from the internet for the summer. All of it. All platforms.
On the other hand, though, there's no real evidence that they were deliberately targeting kids. In fact, many of their themes, gender, sexuality, online hate, are topics that teenagers and young adults engage with more than children do. Personally, I think their audience was probably a mix. Just like with most TikTok creators, the platform doesn't exactly give you perfect control over who ends up watching your videos.
Two different men hit on me at the club over the weekend.
One gay guy and one straight guy. Now don't get me wrong. I love that my gender is being perceived differently between everybody, okay? I love that for me. I'm living my androgynous masculine life, okay? I love it here.
Personally cringed a lot while watching most of their videos, but the relaxed and more sensitive ones were actually quite easier to watch.
I got outed to my homophobic nana exactly a year ago today, and I had never talked about it on here. I made a whole video for it, absolutely in tears, crying when it happened, but decided not to post it and to keep it for myself.
Personally, I don't think Fuzzz99 was a predator, nor do I think they were deliberately misleading kids, but I do understand why people were rubbed the wrong way by their content style and branding. The information in their gender videos was often correct, but the delivery made it easy for outsiders to mock people associating with these terms.
What's agender and why does the flag look like this? Well, like some other identities, agender is an umbrella term.
And again, none of that justifies the sheer scale of harassment they received. Criticism turned into cruelty, and cruelty turned into real-life consequences, police involvement, doxing, and a creator being forced offline. So the question we have to ask is this: where do we draw the line between holding someone accountable for their content and destroying them for being annoying? Because in the case of Fuzzz99, it feels like the internet didn't just cross that line, it sprinted past it. That should have been the end of it, a respectful back and forth between creators with different views. But instead, people twisted the whole thing into something much darker. Suddenly the narrative shifted, from "this is advice for trans people" to Fuzzz99 is convincing children to become trans. The fact that people quickly labeled him with such serious accusations without ever seeing actual proof of his conversations with younger audiences is not only unfair, it's unreasonable. Nowhere in that original TikTok did they say, "You should be trans," or "Kids, follow my steps." All they said was, "Here's what I did to look more masculine." That's a personal testimony, not propaganda. Yet people projected their own fears onto it, reframing it as predatory. And personally, I think that's where this whole discourse really jumped the rails.
That all of the problems that they face, or at least all of the insecurities they have, are a result of them physically being in the wrong body. That's an ideology, and I think that that's incredibly inappropriate to be preaching to children.
So first off, I'd like to say that I really appreciate that creator being as respectful as they could to me in that video. However, they completely missed what we stand for and what we do around here, so I just want to clarify for a minute. One, we do not preach to kids that they were born in the wrong bodies and that they need to change themselves. That would be really messed up if that's what we did around here. I preach to people to be themselves and that there's nothing wrong with being you.
On the other hand, I can acknowledge why some people were uncomfortable. Talking about gender expression in such a blunt, casual way, especially on a platform with so many young users, will inevitably raise eyebrows. Parents who stumble across that kind of content might worry about what their kids are being exposed to. I get that. Social media doesn't come with PG codes like DSTV, so I do think there's space for a discussion about how creators frame sensitive topics. But then again, that doesn't mean we should villainize people for simply existing and sharing their truth. There's a big difference between critiquing tone and outright accusing someone of brainwashing children. And
Bro,
Bruh, where? Show me these kids. Or better yet, let me see the doctor that's doing it. No kid and no doctor is performing any kind of surgery on kids.
That's where Fuzzz99's own clarification comes in. In their response, they were crystal clear. They do not preach to kids that they're born in the wrong body. They do not tell people they need to change themselves. Instead, their message is about being yourself, about finding comfort in your body, and about doing what makes you feel at home in your own skin. Now, whether you personally like their delivery style or not is another story. Personally, I think their loud theatrical style makes it harder for people to take them seriously. The information might be accurate.
Like some other identities, agender is an umbrella term, which means there's different identities under the umbrella. Hey. Agender friends consider themselves genderless or gender neutral. Or also as an unidentifiable gender too. They don't like gender and don't want to be perceived as a gender.
Their theatrics can drown out the sincerity, and unfortunately, that's where the danger lies. When people see them as the face of the LGBTQ+ community, exaggerated, loud, hard to watch, they project that onto everyone else. It diminishes the validity of the terms and experiences they're actually trying to explain. That sucks them because the information itself is valuable.
Being trans is when you go from being a boy to a girl or a girl to a boy. Not exactly. Well, what is it then?
Again, disliking someone's style is not a free pass to vilify them. A lot of the criticism stopped being about content and instead became about character. People weren't saying, this video is cringe, this person is a predator, this person is dangerous, this person shouldn't exist. That's a massive leap and it's harmful.
Everybody needs to stop stitching Fuzzz99. We all know they're super annoying and they give us creeps and make us want to cry. But if we keep stitching them, they're just going to keep popping up on our For You page even more and more and more. We need to stop.
On the other hand, I can understand why some viewers found contradictions in their branding. They often describe their content as family-friendly, but then mixed in jokes about being a top or bottom. For adults, those jokes might be harmless innuendo. But for parents seeing a 29-year-old making them on a platform dominated by kids, it raises questions about the audience. But
I was waiting for this comment. I knew it was coming. I knew it. I freaking love fruit. Probably because I'm a little fruity myself.
again, we have to ask, does confusion about the audience justify harassment? Does it justify doxing, swatting, or police involvement? Absolutely not. And that's what bothers me the most. Criticism is fine. Disagreeing is fine. Saying, I don't like this person's content, is fine. But escalating it to false allegations and harassment campaigns is crossing a line. Personally, I think Fuzzz99 deserved fair critique, but not the wave of hate they got. People were quick to point out contradictions in their content, but just as quick to turn those into character assassinations. And once that cycle begins, it's nearly impossible to stop. While Fuzzz99 is wrong about most things, they are right about the fact that certain people are using their cringeworthy videos as an excuse to throw shade on them.
I just don't get why you get so much hate and why you're hated so much. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, I don't think you or anyone else deserves that, but I just find you and your content annoying.
If we're being honest, they've got their fair share of haters too, like one Redditor. And maybe that's the real lesson here. The internet loves to build people up, but it loves tearing them down even more. Fuzzz99 might have been cringe. They might have been over the top. But did they really deserve to be branded as dangerous, harassed into silence, and forced to involve the police? Or is this yet another example of how online mobs blur the line between criticism and cruelty? Their content blurred the line between childlike and child-direct.
It's like nobody wants to be straight.
The overall behavior, the speech, the mannerisms, the aesthetics of these videos are that of what my 4-year-old son would be watching in terms of Blue's Clues or Blippi. Which begs the question of, why? Why? Why are you trying to reach an audience of that age and that maturity? And in doing so, talking about the things that you are talking about. You are telling young children that nobody wants to be straight.
To be fair, that criticism didn't come from nowhere. Maul often described their own content as family-friendly, yet in the same breath, they would post jokes about being a top or a bottom, or even hint at dating their viewers. For an adult in their mid-20s, that kind of humor clashed with the innocent branding they had built for themselves. And honestly, that was a mistake. When you market yourself like the Blippi or Wiggles of TikTok, you invite parents and younger viewers to see you as safe, wholesome, and geared toward children.
In exactly 1 week on June 10th, 2023, we're having our free Fuzzball Pride Party, baby.
Critics have a point. Blippi and the Wiggles aren't making content about going on dates with their audience. They're not mixing children's entertainment with adult references. And when Mal did, it came across as immature at best and unsettling at worst. This contradiction was one of the biggest cracks in their public image.
Exactly 2 years ago today, I decided that I would call y'all the Fuzzball!
Here's the other side of that argument. Being childlike doesn't automatically make someone a predator. That leap from weird vibes to dangerous is where the internet lost its grip on nuance. There's a difference between saying this content is cringe and confusing and declaring this person is a danger to children. Instead of just saying they disliked Mal's style or the amount of information they wrapped that dislike in alarming language, painting them as a threat.
Hello, my lovely fuzzballs. Today, we are going to be playing a game called Suck Up, where basically you play as a vampire and have to convince different AIs to let you into their home. However, we are going to be testing this AI, all these different AIs, and see if any of them are homophobic.
Yes, Mal's style was undeniably strange. Their hyper-theatrical delivery, cartoonish voices, and exaggerated facial expressions made it seem like they were performing for toddlers rather than peers. For many viewers, that uncanny Cocomelon energy coming from a grown adult felt bizarre. Plenty of adults enjoy being quirky or playful online, but Mal's approach leaned so hard into kiddie aesthetics that it made people uncomfortable.
I'm going to my first ever concert tomorrow night, and I don't know what to wear.
Problem is what people did with that discomfort. Instead of leaving it at "this isn't for me," they escalated it into accusations that carried far more weight. Suddenly Mal wasn't just cringe. They were being called a predator. Once those words entered the discourse, there was no going back.
Stupid things I've done to impress a girl, part 2. Woo, woo. This one time, I was talking to a girl. She was pretty cute. She was going off about hockey, something she was really passionate about. And I wanted to show her that I'm pretty passionate about stuff too. But like art. Because hockey's great, but art is amazing.
To be clear, calling someone a predator is not a casual insult, especially when people's only evidence is them asking fans if they would go out with them in their childish attitude. It's a life-ruining allegation. At one point, people even tried to point to a minor they were friends with, only to later learn that the minor was actually their 17-year-old cousin. Inappropriate for an adult in their 20s to be best friends with someone younger? Maybe. But in context, it didn't actually prove any predatory intent. Family dynamics, especially in queer and artistic spaces, often don't line up with traditional age group social circles. And even if it wasn't their cousin, being friends with a 17-year-old is not the same thing as grooming them. This is where the criticism overshot its mark. By branding Mal as a predator, people weren't just attacking them, they were watering down the language we use to describe real abuse. If every quirky, overly theatrical adult online gets accused of grooming, then what words do we have left for actual predators? The internet seems to have forgotten that it's possible to dislike something without morally justifying the dislike by creating outlandish claims. On the positive side, Mal did offer something that a lot of young LGBTQ+ people needed: representation. They weren't afraid to speak openly about identity, to share tips for trans people trying to present in ways that made them comfortable, and to be unapologetically themselves in a world that often demands conformity. For all the criticisms about tone and delivery, their message was consistent: be yourself. And that message resonated with a lot of people who didn't have voices like that in their own lives.
People who identify as omnisexual fall under the bi umbrella, which means they share a lot of similarities with other identities that fall under the same umbrella, but are different. Hey.
It's also worth pointing out that their content wasn't designed to recruit or convince anyone despite what their detractors claimed. Mall never said, "You need to be trans." What they said was, "Here's what I did, here's my story." That's not indoctrination, that's sharing lived experience. And for trans youth or questioning individuals, that kind of representation can be affirming, even life-saving.
Nintendo really just said trans rights in a major Mario video game. In the new remake of Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, Nintendo finally verifies across every single version of the game in every country that the character Vivian is trans.
That doesn't erase the contradictions. Mall wanted to be seen as family-friendly, but they blurred boundaries in ways that made their image confusing. They leaned into a performance style that came across as juvenile, and while some found it endearing, others found it unbearable. And when those people looked for ways to articulate their discomfort, they didn't stop at annoying or cringe. They went straight for accusations that carried the heaviest possible weight. On one hand, their branding choices, their immature jokes, and their confusing performance style opened them up to criticism. They made mistakes. They blurred boundaries. They failed to recognize how their content might come across to parents, to young viewers, or to peers. Those are valid criticisms. On the other hand, the way the internet responded was disproportionate. Instead of constructive feedback, they received harassment, false allegations, and police involvement.
I have to take a break for a little while until a lot of this hate calms down. It might be a week, it might be a month, it might be a year, it might be forever.
This is where I have to be critical again. As a creator, part of the job is knowing your audience. If everyone is telling you your style is alienating, then you can't just dismiss them as bullies. At some point, you have to confront the possibility that you're performing for an audience that doesn't exist, or at least not at the scale you imagine. And Mall never seemed to face that reality. Instead, they doubled down.
I have a date with a cute girl tonight, okay? I'm going. What are you doing? First of all, the flower section here slaps.
It's pretty obvious at this point that when Maldonut was picking out his target audience, he certainly went off course. On the other hand, that doesn't serve as a free pass for all the hate that he's getting. I've blocked creators myself because their style grated on me, but I've also never felt the need to escalate that dislike into harassment. People didn't just criticize Mall's content, they speculated wildly about their private life. Some even went as far as suggesting that the police must have found bad things on Mall's hard drive, which is why they disappeared from TikTok. That leap from cringe creator to secret predator under a police investigation wasn't based on evidence. It was based on projection, rumor, and in many cases, outright homophobia and transphobia. As one person put it, it often felt like people wanted Mall to be a predator, just so their hatred would feel justified. That's chilling when you think about it.
I love making people laugh and smile and forget about all their troubles. I love helping people feel comfortable in their bodies and always preach that there's nothing ever wrong with being you and that you should always identify and do the things that make you happy and feel most like you. I love learning about my community and I love helping educate others about my community too.
On the other hand, I can't ignore the fact that Mall didn't make things easy for themselves. They were sometimes sloppy in how they presented. Videos with visible hickeys, a constant mix of childlike performance and adult references? Those are choices that understandably confused and alienated audiences. If you're going to lean into an over-the-top persona, you have to think carefully about consistency. When your brand leans heavily into a cartoon-like persona, but suddenly shifts to more mature jokes, people are naturally going to question your judgment.
How does that have to do with Thanksgiving? I don't understand. We're racist. This was so bad. This was so bad. Will 100% get you into the Thanksgiving mood. The vibes are there. Could have been better. Why did they make this? Do not waste your time. Literally do anything else.
Again, questionable judgment is not the same thing as predatory behavior, and I think that's where many of Mall's defenders were coming from. One viewer explained it well. It's fine to find them annoying, loud, even tacky, but that doesn't justify labeling them with extreme accusations about targeting younger audiences. That leap didn't just harm Mall, it harmed the entire LGBTQ+ community because it played into long-standing stereotypes about queer people being dangerous around kids. And the fact that so many queer creators piled onto the bullying made it sting even more.
What's the difference between pansexual and panromantic? Well,
Critics were quick to point out that if a straight adult had created content in the same childlike, theatrical, sometimes suggestive way, the backlash would have been even harsher. But I think the truth is more complicated. Being queer didn't shield Mall, it made them a bigger target. Yes, they sometimes leaned on their identity defensively, but the scale of harassment they faced wasn't because they were hiding behind queerness. Looking back, I find myself torn. On one hand, Mall made glaring mistakes that any creator should have been smarter about. They alienated potential audiences, made poorly thought-out jokes, and blurred lines between family-friendly and adult content in ways that were bound to backfire.
Yo, I think I know what this one is. Really? You do? Yeah, it's when you say bye to gender. Bye, gender. That is not what it means. Oh, well, what else could it be?
The most ironic part of all is this. The valid criticisms that could have helped Mall grow as a creator were buried under the hysteria. Imagine if the conversation had stayed focused on the real issues, like whether their tone was accessible to anyone outside of a niche, whether their humor was alienating, or whether their style was sustainable long-term. Those are conversations that could have made them better. Instead, Mall was reduced to a caricature, the loud, cringe predator.
Why so many of you want to see me brush my teeth on here? I don't know, like Kiss Ross just punched Chris Ross in the
whole situation with Fuzzz99 says more about internet culture than it does about Mall themselves. We live in a time where disliking someone isn't enough. You can't just say, "This isn't for me," and move on. You have to find a moral reason why disliking them is justified. You have to inflate personal distaste into collective outrage. Mall was flawed, frustrating, and sometimes careless. But they weren't the monster people made them out to be. They were a creator who didn't fully understand their own audience, caught in the crossfire of a culture that confuses cringe with crime. Remember, creators are humans too. Even their content can be overbearing at times.
My family at dinner last night told me that I was ugly, that my little chin hairs are disgusting, and that I'm never gonna be able to grow a beard and do what I want to do in life. And it really hurt. And I've already been dealing with dysphoria a lot, so like definitely didn't help my case last night. But I'm here to tell you today that you are not ugly, you are not disgusting, you are a wonderful, amazing human being. And just because your family doesn't understand what you're going through doesn't mean that you don't deserve to be happy.
I think that's where Mall misstepped most. If you lean into aesthetics and branding that resemble children's entertainment, you can't be shocked when people assume kids are the ones watching. And if you then mix in jokes about sex or remarks like "you, who would want to be straight," the clash is not only jarring, it becomes outright inappropriate.
It's like blah, because like nobody wants to be straight.
Again, here we are, talking about brainwashing.
On the other hand, diehard fans were quick to point out that Mall never explicitly said their content was for kids. In their mind, they might have been aiming at the quirky young adult crowd, the same audience that once loved Thomas Sanders or the so-random humor era of Tor and Tumblr. But if that was their intention, then Mall failed to recognize that trends had shifted. The same persona that might have worked in 2015 was seen as cringe or toxic.
Understand the message of your video or videos, and I appreciate it. However, consider that there is no need for you to be
freaking yelling! Like, pipe down! Oh my god!
Also, blink twice if you're an actual human being. Because, something tells me you're being controlled by, AI robots.
The thing that does stand out, though, is that despite all the noise, there were glimpses of what Mall could have done differently. Some believe that if they dropped the forced persona and leaned into their genuine self, they might have actually thrived. The energy was there, the confidence was there, but the packaging was all wrong.
Happy 5 years, you fuzz balls! Woo! I can't believe we've been making videos every single day for the last 5 years. We've come a hell of a long way, but...
Instead of authenticity, viewers got a character that felt fake, forced, and confusing in terms of audience. And maybe that's why the police telling Mall to leave the internet was the best advice they could have gotten. Not because they were guilty of anything, but because TikTok's short attention span would move on eventually. People forget. New scandals rise. old controversies fade. Had Mall taken the time offline to rethink their brand, to clarify who they were speaking to, and to rebuild more authentically, they might have had a shot at a quieter return. In the end, it's not really about the creator. It's about how audiences respond to content they dislike, how quickly cringe turns into canceled, and how little space the internet leaves for nuance. It's about how creators blur boundaries, sometimes irresponsibly, and how audiences weaponize that blur into accusations that ruin lives. Personally, I don't think Mall was ever the monster some made them out to be, but I also don't think they were without faults.
I really hate to come on here to make this video, and I really don't want to, because I know that a lot of you out there still really enjoy and like my videos, and they make your day and they make you smile, and that's all I've ever wanted in life. Unfortunately, this morning I had a really bad incident with a hater and had to get the police involved. A lot of people in my life know my current situation right now, and I wish I could talk about it more, but I don't want to.
What do you think? Was Mall a misunderstood creator whose biggest crime was bad branding, or were the red flags too big to ignore? Did the internet go too far in punishing them? Or was the backlash an inevitable consequence of their own choices? Let me know your thoughts down below, because this isn't simply about Mall. It's about how we treat creators, and about whether we've lost the ability to simply say, I don't like this, without destroying someone's life.